London, February 2001. A spare bedroom. 3 in the morning. A 35-year-old unemployed Scotsman in his pajamas hits the enter key, and just like that, he is inside the Pentagon. And the craziest part, there was no password. He didn't crack anything. He didn't break a single lock. The door was simply open. Gary McKinnon wasn't a spy. He wasn't part of a Russian crew. He was a depressed IT contractor sitting in his girlfriend's aunt's flat, and he was hunting for one thing: aliens. But this isn't just a story about a hacker. It's about the 97 military computers he wandered through, completely undetected, the UFO photograph he says he found, and then lost forever, and the 70-year prison sentence he never served a single day of. He left one message behind on a US Navy machine: "Your security is crap. I am solo." This is how a man chasing aliens pulled off what prosecutors called the biggest military hack of all time, and then walked free. To understand Gary McKinnon, you have to go back to the beginning. Glasgow, 1966, the year he was born. His stepfather kept paperbacks on the shelves, books about flying saucers, about cover-ups, about the things governments don't say out loud, and young Gary read them. He read all of them, and he never stopped. By the time he was a teenager, it wasn't a hobby anymore. It wasn't a phase. It was a thesis. The bookshelf kept growing. Roswell, Project Blue Book, the testimony of men who swore they had seen something in the sky. He came to believe one thing with total certainty. He believed the United States government was hiding something enormous: captured spacecraft, anti-gravity, free energy, technology reverse-engineered from things that did not come from this planet. He had been certain of it since childhood, and nothing in his life would ever shake that certainty. In his early 20s, he moved south to London, carrying the obsession with him. He became a systems administrator, an IT contractor, a man who could build and fix a computer network. He worked freelance, small jobs, the kind of work that pays in cash by the day. He was good with computers, quiet, self-taught. But then his world started to shrink. By 2000, the contracts dried up. The dot-com bubble had burst, and the work simply stopped coming. He was 34, then 35, unemployed, and sliding into a deep depression. There was no job to wake up for, no money coming in, no reason to keep regular hours. The days blurred into the nights. He moved into a spare room in Crouch End, North London. The flat belonged to the aunt of his girlfriend, Tamsin. It was, by any measure, a low point. A grown man, broke, in a borrowed bedroom, with his life quietly falling apart around him. And that is where the old CRT monitor sat. That is where the 56K modem waited to dial. There, he picked a username, one word: solo, like the smuggler from Star Wars, like a man who works completely alone. It fit him perfectly. No crew, no mentor, no one to answer to, just him, the modem, and the belief that had followed him since childhood. And that is what he was. He wasn't part of a hacking crew. He wasn't on a Russian forum. He wasn't buying or selling exploits. He was a man in his pajamas, in a borrowed room, at 3 in the morning, hunting for a single thing. This was not a hacker in the way you might imagine. This was a man with one obsession. So the real question is this: how does a man like that walk straight into the most powerful military on Earth? The answer is uncomfortable, because in February 2001, the state of American military cybersecurity was, frankly, a disaster. The Pentagon was in the middle of a massive migration, moving from old Windows systems to newer ones. Old machines stayed online. New machines came up half-configured. NASA ran its own networks. The Navy ran its own. The Army ran its own. Each base, each command, each building, all separate. There was no single wall around any of it. And inside that mess sat a problem so basic it has a nickname in every IT department: blank passwords. A blank password is exactly what it sounds like. The username field is filled in. The password field is empty. You hit enter, and you are inside. No cracking, no brute force, no clever trick, just an empty box and an unlocked door. It happens for the most ordinary reasons in the world. Someone set up a machine and forgot. Someone left a default account switched on. Someone meant to fix it later, and later never came. In 2001, this wasn't rare. It was everywhere. The Earl Naval Weapons Station had it. Building 8 at NASA Johnson had it. Army facilities in Virginia had it. Air Force machines had it. The internal IT staff knew about it. Memos existed. Audits had flagged it, in writing, more than once. And still, nothing moved. Why? Because before September 11th, 2001, the threat they imagined was a completely different one. The big fear was nation-state espionage. Russia, China, trained intelligence services with huge budgets. Nobody was modeling a depressed Scotsman on a dial-up modem. So there were no public-facing firewalls on many of these networks. No mandatory VPN, no two-factor anything. Some machines were sitting right on the open internet, with administrator accounts and no password at all. And here's the thing. They had already been warned. Back in February 1998, an Israeli teenager known as the Analyzer, along with 2 boys from California, broke into U.S. military networks and stayed inside for 2 full weeks. The FBI called the operation Solar Sunrise. The president's national security team gathered in the Situation Room. With tensions high, they genuinely feared it might be Iraq, preparing for war. It was teenagers on dial-up. 3 years later, the Pentagon still hadn't learned the lesson. The memos were still ignored. The blank passwords were still there. You didn't need to be a genius to get in. You needed a port scanner and patience. So when people later called this a feat of brilliance, that wasn't quite right. 97 machines wasn't a masterpiece of hacking. It was a long hallway of open doors inside the most powerful military on the planet. All Gary needed now was a reason to walk down it. And on one night in 2001, he got it. May 9th, 2001, the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. A doctor named Stephen Greer held a press conference. He called it the Disclosure Project, and more than 20 witnesses walked up to that microphone. These were not fringe figures. Former military officers, air traffic controllers, defense contractors, people with security clearances and careers to lose. One by one, they stepped forward to say, on the record, what they claimed to have seen. A U.S. Air Force sergeant testified that a NASA scientist had shown him photographs of structures on the far side of the moon. Buildings, towers, domes. A former NASA contractor testified that she had personally been instructed to airbrush UFOs out of satellite photographs before they were released to the public. She said it had happened more than once, that it was simply part of the job. And every single witness said the same thing. The U.S. government has UFO files. The U.S. government has recovered craft. The U.S. government has been lying about it for 50 years. Gary McKinnon watched the footage in that little flat in Crouch End, and something locked into place. For his whole life, he had only read about this in books. Now here were soldiers and scientists saying it out loud. He believed they were describing anti-gravity, reverse-engineered from captured craft. And he made a decision. He would go and look for the proof himself, inside the United States government's own computers. He had no team, no budget, no contacts. He had a 56K modem and a Perl script. In his own words, he searched for blank passwords. He wrote a small program that could scan tens of thousands of machines and find the ones left wide open. 65,000 computers, checked in just over 8 minutes. So how do you break into the Pentagon from a spare bedroom? You don't break in at all. You let a simple script find the doors nobody bothered to lock. He worked between 3 and 6 in the morning, London time. The flat was silent. Tamsin was asleep. Cigarette smoke drifted under the door. He ran the scan. He got a list of open machines. He picked one. He logged in. He was in. There was no alarm, no warning, no security team scrambling on the other side of the ocean. Just a quiet desktop, somewhere inside a U.S. military building, opening up to a stranger in his pajamas. He looked around, found nothing interesting, logged out, picked another target, in again, then another and another. Night after night, he simply walked the hallways of a system that didn't know he was there. To move around more easily, he bought a piece of commercial software, a remote access tool that real system administrators use to manage servers from home. He paid for it with his own email address. He installed it on the machines he entered, so he could come back, browse the files, and read the documents at his leisure. He wasn't smuggling secrets out to a server in Moscow. Picture the truth of it. He was reading PDF files, alone, in a North London spare room, at 3 a.m. And then, he says, he found something. NASA Johnson Space Center, Building 8. Gary later explained that this was where image processing happened, where raw photographs from space were handled before being released to the public. He claims he found a folder of high-resolution images. He clicked on one. What loaded was, in his words, a silvery, cigar-shaped object, with geometric spheres on either side. No visible seams, no riveting, nothing that looked man-made, or like anything we had ever built. But there was a problem. The image was enormous, and he was on a dial-up connection. It loaded line by line, painfully slowly, from the top of the screen downward. He watched it crawl into view, inch by inch, certain he was finally looking at the proof he had chased his entire life. And then, before it finished, his connection dropped. He never saw that full image again. No screenshot, no copy. Just a memory of something half-loaded on a screen at 3 a.m. Did he really see it? That is the question that would follow him for the rest of his life, because he kept hunting, on a U.S. Air Force machine. He says he found an Excel spreadsheet. He later told a magazine that one file was titled Non-Terrestrial Officers. It contained names and ranks of U.S. Air Force personnel he says were registered nowhere else, along with information about what he called ship-to-ship transfers, listing ships he had never seen named anywhere. Names, ranks, ships that didn't officially exist. Did he copy any of it? The story varies. What's documented is only what he said he saw. He kept going anyway. Pentagon, Army, Navy, Air Force, 97 computers in total, and on some of them, before he logged off. He left a little message in a text file, a signature. Your security is crap. I am solo. 13 months, one man, one modem, one obsession. He took no money. He stole no weapon blueprints. He didn't sell a single thing he found. He summed up the entire project in 11 words. I was in search of suppressed technology. But something was about to go very wrong, and the timing could not have been worse. September 23rd, 2001, just 12 days after 9/11, the Earl Naval Weapons Station in Colts Neck, New Jersey. Earl is one of the Navy's primary munitions depots on the East Coast. It loads the ships sailing for the Atlantic and the Gulf. That night, Solo was inside its network. He browsed, he copied, he installed his tools, and then something broke. The next morning, 300 machines at Earl were offline. Critical systems would not boot. The base lost computer function for an entire week. The damage estimate filed later came to $290,431. Think about that timing for a moment. 12 days after the worst attack on American soil in history. With the entire country on high alert, with the military bracing for whatever might come next, a major Navy weapons depot suddenly went dark. The people responsible for loading munitions onto warships could not even turn their computers on, and nobody yet knew why. And it wasn't only Earl. Around the same time, the Army's military district of Washington took a hit. 2,455 user accounts were deleted. 2,000 machines went offline for 24 hours. This was the Army responsible for the Capitol itself, for Arlington, for the ground around the Pentagon. 12 days after September 11th. Across all 97 systems, the total damage came to around $700,000 in the British filings. $900,000, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Now, did Gary intend this? He always insisted the damage was accidental, but intentions don't show up on a damaged server. And by this point, he was making mistakes. He was exhausted. Months of 3 AM sessions had destroyed his sleep. He used that remote access tool he had bought with his real email address. He logged in from the same dial-up account, again and again, an account in his own name with his Crouch End postcode on file. He reused the same username, Solo, across machine after machine. There was no Tor for the public yet, no consumer VPN industry, just a single dial-up line, tied directly to him, The trail he left behind wasn't really a trail at all. It was a road that led straight to his bedroom door. In the United States, federal agents traced the intrusions. They mapped the timing. They followed the IP address back across the Atlantic, and the lead crossed over to British police. The unit that took it was the National High-Tech Crime Unit, brand new, stood up in 2001 to handle exactly this kind of case. They got a warrant, and they drove to Crouch End. March 19th, 2002, early morning. Gary McKinnon was asleep. He later described the moment to a newspaper. At the bottom of his bed, there was a voice. "Hello, my name's Jeff Donson from the National High-Tech Crime Unit. Gary McKinnon, you're under arrest." Officers in his bedroom. Hard drives going into evidence bags. Tamsin's aunt's spare room, turning into a crime scene. And in the interview that followed, Gary told them everything. He confirmed that he was solo. He explained the script. He talked, at length, about UFOs. He wasn't trying to hide. In his mind, he hadn't really done anything wrong. He had been searching for the truth, and he assumed that once he explained it, everyone would understand. Then they released him on police bail. He thought the worst he was facing was a British fine. He had no idea that, across the ocean, the United States was preparing to ask for 70 years of his life. In Britain, the case wasn't enormous. There was a law, the Computer Misuse Act. A prosecution was possible. Realistically, it probably meant a fine and some probation. Then the United States filed. November 12, 2002, the Eastern District of Virginia. A federal grand jury returned an indictment. The U.S. attorney stood at a press conference, named the defendant, and then said the words that would define the next decade. Mr. McKinnon is charged with the biggest military computer hack of all time. 7 counts. The charges fell under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the same statute used against state-sponsored intrusions, against ransomware crews, against the largest cybercrime cases in American history. Each count carried up to 10 years in federal prison. Each carried $250,000 fine. The maximum total? 70 years. And $1.75 million. The U.S. wanted extradition. They wanted Gary flown to Virginia, tried in a federal court, and sentenced under post-9/11 guidelines. This was the same law, and very nearly the same sentence, that the American government reserved for foreign intelligence operatives and organized cybercrime gangs. Now it was pointed at an unemployed man in a borrowed bedroom. So look at what they were holding against what was actually done. The defendant was 36, unemployed, living in a spare room, diagnosed with nothing yet, but clearly not a well man. The crime was real. He had broken into 97 machines. He had caused real damage at Earl and at the Army's Washington district. But the proposed punishment was 70 years in prison for a man who had been hunting aliens on a 56K modem from his girlfriend's aunt's flat. Gary was at his mother's house when the news arrived. He had expected a British fine, maybe community service. He had never imagined Virginia. He tried to negotiate. He tried to offer something in exchange. He genuinely thought what he had seen was valuable. The cigar-shaped object, the spreadsheet, the non-terrestrial officers. In his mind, he was holding evidence the whole world deserved to know about. But what did he actually have in his hands that he could put in front of a court? A blurry memory of half a downloaded image. The name of a file he could no longer prove existed. The word of a man who had broken in. As he put it himself, with a kind of sad honesty, it wasn't a very good bargaining chip. The U.S. wanted 70 years. He had nothing to trade. So he went home to Crouch End, to wait for a court to decide whether the United Kingdom would put him on a plane. That decision would take 10 years, and he would not face it alone. Her name was Janice Sharp, Gary's mother, a musician and songwriter, 60 years old when the indictment landed. She had watched her son slide for years. The withdrawal, the insomnia, the fixation on aliens, the certainty that nobody else shared, and now the United States wanted 70 years of him. She decided, simply, that this would not happen. She was not a lawyer. She was not a campaigner. She had no network in Westminster, no contacts in Washington. So she started with what she had. She built a website. She printed leaflets. She stood outside the Home Office in the cold, holding signs. day after day. She wrote to members of parliament, to newspapers, to anyone who would read a single word of it. She gave hundreds of interviews, telling the same story over and over, never letting it fade. "This is my son," she would say. "He was looking for UFOs. He has never been violent. He has never even met an American. And the sentence they want is longer than they give for armed robbery." It became a kind of drumbeat, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. A mother who would not be moved, standing against the full weight of two governments. And slowly, people began to listen. Musicians and public figures lent their names to the campaign. Sting backed it. David Gilmour of Pink Floyd recorded a song for Gary. Bob Geldof spoke up. So did the musician Peter Gabriel and the actress Julie Christie. A man who had himself been held hostage for years in Beirut wrote letters of support. The British press picked it up, then the major papers, then Parliament itself. By 2008, Gary's name was on the front pages. And then came the piece that changed everything. In August 2008, a Cambridge professor, the head of the university's Autism Research Center, examined Gary McKinnon. The diagnosis was Asperger's syndrome. Suddenly, the whole picture reorganized itself. The fixation, the 13-month obsession, the username, solo, the complete inability to stop, the certainty that the answer was always just one folder away. The campaign now had a clinical anchor. Janice had medical evidence. Gary wasn't a criminal mastermind. He had a documented condition, and it had driven the very behavior the United States wanted to imprison him for 70 years. But evidence is one thing, the law is another. And the legal battle ground its way through every layer of the British system. He lost in the High Court. He lost in the House of Lords, the highest court in the land at the time. He lost at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, door after door. The answer came back the same, no. Each ruling brought the plane to Virginia one step closer. And each time, Janice refused to accept it and filed another appeal. By 2009, the medical assessments had turned dire. Two separate psychiatric reports submitted to the Home Office said the same terrible thing. If Gary were forced onto that plane, he would very likely take his own life in American custody. And here is what makes the story so painful. The politicians knew. A new prime minister took office. He read the file, and he did not intervene. A new government inherited the case, and it did not intervene either. The years dragged on, and Gary simply waited, trapped between two countries, while his health got worse. He stayed in Crouch End the whole time. He couldn't work. He couldn't leave the country. He couldn't even go online. The man who had once roamed through 97 government computers now lived inside a kind of invisible cell, and his mother still did not stop. In 2012, she published a book about the whole ordeal. That same year, a major British human rights organization gave her their Human Rights Award. But the fight still wasn't over. Then came October 16th, 2012. The Home Secretary was Theresa May. She had held the office for 2 years. She had read every report, every psychiatric assessment, every appeal in the file. This was not a popular decision to make in either direction. Block it, and risk a diplomatic rift with the United States. Allow it, and risk sending a vulnerable man to his death. She rose in a packed House of Commons. The case had been live for an entire decade. The chamber went quiet. She spoke for several minutes, and then she delivered the line that ended it. She had concluded that Mr. McKinnon's extradition would create such a high risk of him ending his own life that sending him would be incompatible with his human rights. Extradition blocked. 10 years of legal process, 2 governments, 3 courts, and a transatlantic standoff, all collapsed in a single ministerial decision. But there was one question left. Would the United Kingdom now charge him itself? December 14, 2012. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer, announced the decision. There would be no UK charges. The evidence sat in American hands. The witnesses sat inside American agencies. A British prosecution simply wasn't viable. And with that, it was over. Gary McKinnon served 0 days. Not in an American prison. Not in a British one. Not anywhere. The biggest military computer hack of all time, in the words of a US attorney, ended with a man walking freely around the streets of Crouch End. He is in his late 50s now. He still lives in London. He has never gone back online the way Solo once did. His mother got her award. She wrote her book. She spoke at conferences. And the 97 machines were long ago rebuilt. In the years that followed, American federal security rules finally tightened. Mandatory two-factor authentication, network segmentation, continuous monitoring, the exact kind of basic hygiene that Solo had found missing back in 2001. In a strange way, a depressed man hunting aliens had exposed the hole the most powerful military on Earth had been warned about and ignored for years. The cigar-shaped object never resurfaced. The non-terrestrial officer's spreadsheet was never produced in any court, and the US government continues, to this day, to deny the very things Gary went looking for. We will probably never know whether he saw anything real at all, or whether a tired, obsessive mind found exactly what it was desperate to find. So we are left with the strangest of endings. 97 government computers, 13 months of breaking in, real damage at a Navy weapons depot, just 12 days after 9/11, a threatened 70 years in prison, the same range reserved for foreign spies, and a man who spent it all chasing a single childhood belief, that aliens were real and the proof was sitting on a government hard drive somewhere, just one folder away. He never found it, or if he did, he could never prove it. The image dissolved on a slow modem, the spreadsheet vanished into memory, and the most powerful military on Earth quietly fixed its locks and moved on. 0 days served. For 97 computers, hunting aliens. A man chased a childhood belief into the heart of the most powerful military on Earth, was threatened with 70 years, and in the end, walked out the other side a free man. However you feel about what he did, there has never been another story quite like it. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so you can receive new videos.